Tonight we have a very special lady. I have the privilege for the third time to introduce you to our remarkable author, Lee Kessler. She is presenting her third book of the White King trilogy called White King and the Battle of America, The End Game. Lee is a television actress, screenwriter, playwright, and stage director. In addition, during the development of her entertainment career, Lee became a successful entrepreneur, a pioneer in internet commerce, and today owns an international internet business which operates throughout the United States. Impressive. Since the publication of her first two suspense novels, White King and the Doctor and White King Rising, Lee has made numerous TV appearances discussing the book's relevance to the outcome of the War on Terror. At a time of growing diversiveness in our country, we need to understand what actually may be going on behind the scenes if we are to be able to control our individual and collective destinies. The White King series may hold the answers we have all been seeking. Proving again her masterful skill, each book has been eerily, I hope I'm saying that properly, eerily accurate on real-life events. And this last book may help us restore order. Actually, everyone has said, who has read her books, and some of you have because you were here for the other book events, that after she writes the book, what happens in the book actually happens in real life. So it's almost like she is are you a psychic or something?
I'm called the prophet now.
You are a prophet. Lee Kessler is a genius and who had given us quite a gift. And I would like to introduce this wonderful and experienced woman to all of you tonight, Lee Kessler.
Oh, thank you so much. As I said to Ronnie, that's quite an introduction. I'm so happy to be back with you again, and I know I have a microphone. I'm going to take just a minute here to adjust because I cannot see a single one of your faces except the ones up close here. So it would not offend me at all if anybody wanted to move their chairs a little bit closer. I won't have a problem projecting to you, but the nature of what we're going to talk about tonight, I wanted to keep it kind of conversational in there, and I love to look at people's eyes, and I love to see what's going on with it. So anyway, I'm honored to be back here for the third time to talk about the third book. It is the final book in the trilogy of the White King. And lots going on with that, and we'll have quite a bit to talk about as we go. But I'm privileged to be here because this organization does so much in terms of bringing to the public authors information, stimulating stuff. So I don't take it lightly to be here, and it's good to see some people that I have met before. But I think there's quite a few people in the room, if I could see your faces, that are new. So we'll be sure to talk a little bit when we get into the signing and so on. And let me find out first. I'm going to share some information a little bit differently. How many of you were with me either when Ronnie and the club had me in either for the first or the second book or both? Could I see your hands, that and you've read them? Oh, not too many. So the bulk of the people in here tonight, this is your first introduction to this at all. That's good. I'm glad I asked. I won't leave you out. I will go back and discuss what those other two are because they're available as well, but it kind of helps you understand how we ended up with the third book and what's going on. But as she mentioned, I've had a lot of time on radio and television, and Barbara's got me working on a pitch right now. She's very specific and focused on what someone needs to say. But through the question that's come up the most in the last 5, 6, 7 years as this story unfolded was, how does this actress from Hollywood, how did I even begin to approach this? How did I discover what I discovered, and what was I doing that made this prove out to be so real? And I'll address it a bit in detail, but I had planned tonight to share. I was going to answer that question. I've never really answered it directly before. I thought I'd give you some idea into my insight. And these are questions that I asked myself, and it's the thought process I was using that led to the discoveries that are in these books. Now, for those of you who are meeting me for the first time, I have had a long television career. It's over 30 years now as a TV and film actress. But during that time, I had the opportunity to play real people many times. And there's a different type of acting approach that the actor will take when they're playing a real person, which opens the door to ability to analyze real-life people, whether they be like real-life bad guys that I'm writing about and so on. So I had a discipline in that area. I had a marketing background which enables me to look at things through that type of viewpoint. And I'm quite an expert in the human mind and in human behavior. And that combination of factors caused me to look at the things that we've been experiencing in this nation since 2001. We're going to pick up with 2008 and go forward tonight in the third book, but caused me to have the same type of concerns we all have of what's happening to us. How is it that we're struggling so badly, so quickly? What changed in this country? So I was willing to take a look, but I looked through the training, if you will, of the actor. And now part of what an actor does, and a writer too, because I'm a screenwriter and I have, playwright as well. When we're creating or working on characters, we have to ask ourselves, we have to use imagination, and we have to ask ourselves, what if? So what would I do if I were that character in that scene? For example, I played Margaret Truman in the movie with Henry Fonda and E.G. Marshall, a collision course about the Truman and MacArthur conflict. And so if I were playing Margaret Truman, I would have to say, what would I do if I were Margaret Truman in that circumstance? Got it? As compared to what would I do if I were in that circumstance. Nobody needs to know what Lee Kessler would do. I do need to see what Margaret Truman would have done. So the discipline is slightly different. And I looked at this scene and I asked myself the following questions. And the answers to those questions, as I continued to ask them, led to the trilogy of the White King. What if the events of 9/11 and subsequent years were just part of a larger plan to bring mankind into a new dark age? Just put that question down on paper. What if the real-life mastermind was using an old Soviet plan to take the United States out of the picture? What if a brilliant mind control was being executed remotely upon the American people? What if a Trojan horse capable of undermining the very foundations of our republic was brought into the United States? Who could send this Trojan horse and why? How could they pull it off and enslave us all? Most important of all, who could stop them? So that's where I began looking, having no idea really the journey I was about to commence or where this was going to end up. And as I start tonight, I want to acknowledge 3 nonfiction writers. And my books are works of fiction inspired by actual events. But there were 3 people who had direct relevance to this book as we talk about it tonight. They write in nonfiction and talk about being very specific with their data. One of them, and they involve the plots of this story, one of them is E. Benjamin Skinner. He's in this neck of the woods, so to speak. He wrote a book called A Crime So Monstrous, and his book is about the slave trade. He was hired by Newsweek and put undercover as a slave purchaser all over the planet. And he went about undercover doing all of that, and then he wrote that book. Another one which has direct bearing on the subject matter here of this book, A Crisis by Design, which reveals a deliberate and systematic takedown globally and economically and how it was set up and who and so on, in fact. That's by John Truman Wolfe. And the third one and the author, is Rachel here? Rachel, are you in the room? Okay, she's not. Rachel Ehrenfeld, Funding Evil. And Rachel's story is, that's a woman that I know well now. I admire her. She's very courageous. Her work led ultimately to Rachel's Law, which is now federal law and a protection of freedom of speech in the United States. So these are amazing authors, and I mentioned them at the beginning because part of why I did what I did in this third book was I wanted to extend their reach and further their mission. Each of them is so on point, so accurate, that I felt if there's anything I can do in my final story that enhances and drives that line farther and helps you, I would do so. So, now, since a lot of you don't know the stories at all, really, the first book is White King and the Doctor. And that's really the story of who, what, why, and how America's strengths were turned into weaknesses in the last decade, and how the American press has been compromised. Free press in the United States, vital to the survival of this country. And this first book is the story of how that was done. In military terms, it's a story called a fifth column, and I don't know how many of you have a military background, but I just got back from an Air War College and National Security Forum where I was invited in by the Secretary of the Air Force. And a fifth column is placed inside a country that's about to come under attack. And its purpose is to weaken that country, either by sabotage, which is the more cliched approach, or by breaking the solidarity of the people themselves, and then the other forces attack. And my first book is about an actual fifth column brought into the United States that's brought America to the point where Americans are fighting in all sectors with one another. Race on race, religion on religion. It's constant in its stimulus response. And the book reveals in the fiction exactly who did that, why they did it, and how they did it. And it is that story. Kind of important to know if we're going to have a victory. All right? The second book, White King Rising, is the story of a Trojan horse brought in to the United States. Now keep in mind when you read this, because I know you're going to be getting them, I'll be happy to sign them and so on. Keep in mind that a Trojan horse is accepted as a friend. When the Greeks left that horse outside that gate, the people of Troy took it as a gift, and they brought it in. And you need to read this book with exactly this viewpoint, because this book's going to slap you upside the head. I don't care. I know that the people in this room are very committed, dedicated people. You're freedom fighters. You're engaged in your community. This is like really able, involved people. And I'm telling you, the second book's going to slap you upside the head, because a Trojan horse was inserted in here, the belly of which, when the agents dropped out, so to speak, inside America, they infiltrated and penetrated every institution that we count on and anchor our country on. So if you've wondered, how is it that the family unit came under attack? How is it that education has disintegrated? How is it that the justice system seems to be a mess? These are the foundational institutions of this great nation. And it is, the second book is the story of who did that and has been working away. They're kind of like termites in there, you know. They're constantly working away. And I think probably, you're nodding your head, so I think it's probably real to all of you in this room that the United States is not in good shape right now. But that's not by accident. And the story reveals how it was done, and through my young heroes reveals how to defeat it. The enemy's actually very easy to defeat. But you got to know that that Trojan horse that you think might be a friend or an associate or an authority figure, in other words, we as Americans embraced it. We brought it in, and now we're paying the price on it. Now that was that story. And the third book, now, White King and the Battle of America, is the story of who sent that Trojan horse. Why they sent them, what the plan is of their attack, and most importantly, when would that attack commence, or has it already begun? Now, I realized that I was going to have to write the third book. I didn't expect to. I thought I was done with the second one, because it so definitively handles a problem that's destroying us from within. I figured as soon as you knew about it in your own power, you'd go and release it. But I was at a book signing in Los Angeles, and somebody asked a question, which when I answered the question, something stuck in my mind. And as I drove home to Montana at that time, all of a sudden I said, wow, there's another question here. Somebody sent that Trojan horse. Somebody had a reason to weaken us from within first so that they could attack externally. And I'm not speaking militarily here. I'm talking at the level that has nothing necessarily to do with military. And as I looked at it, I said, I'm going to have to go back into the fray again. I'm going to have to go back into this scene and see if I can figure that out. So I began to look again and see if I could do it. And I started with the top game that ends White King and the Doctor. So for those of you who have read it, there's a series of games that enemies are playing with us, and they're in a sequence. And that sequence has allowed and created all the turmoil around the world. The top game has to do with money, so I was willing to go there. But I asked myself, I said, wait a minute, you may have been thinking too small in White King and the Doctor. Because as I ended that book, it was really more about Zawahiri with Al-Qaeda and the psychiatric pharmaceutical cartels at the end of the second book with the money that they make in the green. I was looking at money in that context. And then I said, I have perhaps missed that it is really money itself, which means that I would be looking at the central bankers, the international bankers, those who control the money supply, who control the interest rates, who control the printing, if you will. It's all done digitally now, but printing. The exchange rates and loans. And I said, I have to go there. And at that time, as soon as I did that, I went, oh man, first of all, I don't have any background in finance. Is anybody in the room, gifted in finance, or do you hire experts to do it for you? Okay, and so the enemy can get at us. I'll mention that in a moment. But I remembered a book that I had been given by a business mentor years ago called None Dare Call It Treason. That came up in my mind, written by a former Secretary of the Treasury of the United States. And then I remembered also a lecture given back in 1967. I didn't read it, I listened to it until the 80s. But in that lecture, it was pointed out 12 men out of England who intended to take control of the global economies and currencies and kind of control the world that way. So I said, all right, I'm willing to look, but it's so complex. And I don't have time to train myself in that. And then I stopped and said, wait a minute, where there's complexity, there are lies. And where there's complexity, the enemy hides and he inserts. So I tasked myself, if you will, could I just look and somehow bring that whole arena of international finance that affects all of us and every country, could I somehow bring it down to a simplicity and tell it in a story that you would be able to see very clearly what's happening there and what specifically happened starting in 2008 and has been ongoing ever since. And that was the task I set myself with this book. And that brings me to a subject I want to cover even before we talk about the book, because it has to do with danger. How many of you feel we're living in a very dangerous environment? Very dangerous. It's frightening, isn't it? Well, fortunately, I have a business mentor today, actually, who reminded me something about danger. Danger has to be faced, but you have to face the truth of it. Lots of times we're out there engaging and we're trying to handle dangerous situations, but if we don't fully understand the truth of it, our solutions don't work and it overtakes us. But what's an interesting fact about danger, danger's real, but what we do with our thoughts determines the outcome. And I want to share this with you because it has direct relevance on these stories and why they've proven so true. We control our thoughts. If when there's danger, danger produces fear. And if you allow your thoughts to go to fear, the next thing that happens after that is paralysis. Following me? Okay. On the other hand, you could choose to face that danger, and when, instead of going towards fear, you go towards hope and determination, and that leads to action. And we can control that. Every single individual can control that no matter what you're faced with or what danger exists, not just about my stories, but in life. You drive your thoughts away from fear, which will paralyze you, slow you down, stop stuff. Now, or you turn them towards hope and determination. Now here's the thing I want to share. The enemy knows that, and they know it very well. And they absolutely engineer the news, they engineer the events to create fear, absolutely expecting you to indulge in those fearful thoughts and you will be paralyzed. It has been one of their primary attack lines. And my story, they're gambling that you're going to go that direction. So as I'm sharing with you, I'm not even just talking about the book, I'm sharing you what I learned along the way, not just in life, but in the process of engaging in a certain plane, the real life bad guys. And my young heroes in these books are coming at it the opposite direction. They choose, those of you who know Andy Weir already, and if you don't, you're going to meet him, and then you're going to meet Brian Washington Carver, and then you're going to meet others. These young heroes face the danger, they look for the truth in it, but they take their thoughts always to hope, to determination. They're just unstoppable, these kids. And as such, their actions ultimately defeat that enemy, because that's really all it takes to do. You don't have to fire a single shot against this type of bad guy. Now, I thought I'd do something I didn't do with the other two. I don't normally read anything from the books. I let you read the book, and I'm not actually going to read from one of the chapters. But I think this might save us some time and help you understand what I was attempting to accomplish, and then I'll elaborate a little bit. This is my preface to the third book, White King and the Battle of America. Following a speech I gave last year at a leadership conference for members of Generation Y, for those of you, those are the people that are between 18 and 33 right now. They could be your kids or your grandkids. So, following a speech I gave last year at a leadership conference for members of Generation Y, a college student read my first two books and posted a comment on Facebook. She said, quote, "I've never liked history, but this is history in our time. I learned more from these books than I had in 23 years, end quote. For those of you who have read the first two books in the trilogy, you know that in White King Rising, with the release of the computer game, we moved into a fictitious alternative history, one running parallel to actual events. The third book begins in that alternative history, in a world that could be both the good and the bad. It is the story of what may yet happen, or may even be happening. In these frustrating and dangerous times, I am reminded of several things I embraced along my journey in life. One, that the word crisis in Chinese means opportunity riding a dangerous wind. Two, Mark Twain's ironic observation that it is easier to fool people than it is to convince them that they have been fooled. And three, something Robert F. Kennedy said, there are those who look at things the way they are and ask, why? I dream of things that never were and ask, why not? As we finish the trilogy of the White King, it is my intention that we, no matter the crisis, see what could be and ask, why not? The trilogy's young heroes inspire us to know that no matter what we have to face, something can always be done about it. So that's what I set about to do with this final and terrifying story. Because now we come to this book, and you'll probably see the cover later, but you can see it a bit here. Some of you have made the journey already with some bad guys, but for the first time you see the hand of the actual black player in the chess game. I'm not talking about a racial thing here, I'm talking about the black player in the chess game. He is there, he has positioned all of his pieces against the world itself, and he is setting his final piece in place for the checkmate move. His goal, financial Armageddon, sinking into a slave state in a new dark age. That is where this story begins. And we were talking about, has it started already? My early readers feel it has already started. I'm not getting pushback at all on the validity of this analysis as it goes. So, let me talk to you a little bit, because you're going to read the story, and I do encourage, by the way, the new book, all these books are standalones. They have to be when you write, different books. And so you could read the third book and understand, and you won't be missing stuff. But it is a much richer experience if you have lived with these bad guys, because it's written through their point of view, and you've lived with the young heroes. But a lot of times I get the question, why fiction? And you might even ask yourself that. How many of you in this room read a lot of nonfiction? Okay, good, that's fine. I mean, this is a well-read group and very interested and involved. Would you say that you weight the nonfiction far greater than fiction in your reading? Yeah, I want to talk to you about that, if you don't mind. Okay, I want to share something. All right? You're laughing already.
I said I knew it was coming.
Okay. Many times people dismiss the fiction writer, or they disregard it, or they minimize it in some way. And they might read some fiction, or they may buy some fiction, but they put it in a stack of books, and they're going to read a ton of nonfiction ahead of the fiction. And I'd like to suggest a couple of things to you, and I have said this in television interviews. The fiction writer uses imagination, and he can use that imagination to bridge gaps that stop the nonfiction writer cold. Because in nonfiction, they have to pursue along a fact line, and when they run out of the facts, well, first of all, the facts might not be true. I mean, there's all kinds of problems in reading nonfiction. I'm not going to get off into a talk about that. But assuming that they're pursuing a true line, they run out of facts. That doesn't mean the facts aren't there. They're just not visible. And the nonfiction writer is obligated to stop at that point, which is why sometimes the books you're reading aren't that satisfying to you, because it's like they're laying out the problem, but you don't know where to go with this or whatever. The fiction writer, whether it's a screenwriter, a novelist, a playwright, whatever, they're automatically going to use their creative imagination, understanding character, understanding human nature, and understanding storylines, and they are going to transcend that gap and take you to the next spot and hopefully connect with truth. You see, you mentioned how these things have played out in reality. That was not my intention. Please understand, I was not intending to write true stories. I was attempting to reveal truth to the reader through the stories that would help them understand this chaotic and dangerous environment we're living in, have hope, create solutions for it themselves, and be freed up by it. The fact that these books have proven to be like true stories to the point that people in our government cannot separate the fact from the fiction, including people in intelligence and counterterrorism, I don't even know how to explain that to you. I have a sense of it because I have a spiritual foundation, but that was not my intention, all right? So in any case, fiction uses imagination, but also it has to do with the role of the artist at all in the society. And I know you have a lot of other types of authors in here, so if I could share with you just from the point of view of an artist. The artist has a very specific role in society and in civilization, and it's been that way for thousands of years. The artist casts the vision, and the society moves toward the vision of the artist. A world without artists is not going to be a world that you would want to live in. But how they do it, now it can be done in any form of art, but I'm a writer, so let's talk about writing. The writer communicates through the written word an idea. You fight ideas with ideas. They've got an idea, they see something that maybe should be different, or it should be changed. They see something that they like or don't like, and they begin to put a vision there through their work. And if it's a fiction writer, it's coming at you through story. And they keep putting it there and putting there, you can imagine as book sales or whatnot, and people go into agreement with that vision. And as they go into agreement with that vision, the individual in his own right, in his own field, then goes and changes the world in his own field. Does that make sense to you? Now let me give an example, and I think this will ring home. Take the works of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. At the time that he wrote his novels and they were gotten out to the West, the world was embracing pretty much the philosophy of socialism and communism. You remember that time? When no matter where you look, people not only in the United States but other countries were taught and going in and embracing it willingly, taking it on. He wrote fiction and stories that revealed the truth of what life under that type of philosophy is. He got those stories out to the West, and as we read them, the West became disabused completely with the idea of communism. But I asked myself, what would have happened? Would we possibly still have the Soviet Union had Solzhenitsyn not written the fiction that revealed the truth, that enabled people to then come to his vision of a better world? Take Ibsen with The Doll's House, the playwright. When that play was written is just about the time that the suffrage movement was beginning. Would we not have had a suffrage movement and women's rights or the changes that were made around the world had Ibsen not written what he wrote? Charles Dickens, Oliver Twist. What would labor conditions in the world be like if he had not written Oliver Twist? Harriet Beecher Stowe. Is it possible that we would still have slavery here in the United States had an artist not stepped up and communicated through fiction? You kind of follow? Fiction writer is very, very important because we try. Now, I'm not comparing myself to Charles Dickens and Solzhenitsyn. I'm not, except in one thing: intention. It is my intention, as with the other fiction writers and artists, to bring you to an understanding of something real, reveal some truth, then you go do with it and you create what you want to create with it. But good people will create good things. And that's what I was doing with this. Now, my goal in all the stories, but especially in this one, this book plays out in Montana, my home state for the last 10 years. And Montana becomes almost a character in there. And I was talking with someone earlier today who said, this was breathtaking to me about Montana. By the time I finished, my appreciation of Montana, and this is a very literary guy, and he said, my appreciation of Montana was such, I was ready to move there because do people like that actually exist? But the heroes are the young heroes from the first two books and a host of other ones. And we have complete victory by the end of this trilogy. And it's brought about
by my young heroes in Generation Y. So you've already met a couple of them, but you're about to meet the beautiful Reagan Lynch. You're about to meet William Gray Wolf Monroe. You're about to meet Hector Sanchez. You're about to meet Deshaun Williams. This is a bunch of people from the gangs of Compton to Indian reservations in Montana to my heroes that were already the boy heroes and the gamers and so on. And they all come together in the most unlikely place on Earth for the final stand, the end game. And because in this story, the financial Armageddon has begun. And I think when you read it, you will recognize a lot of the events that you and the rest of the world have been experiencing since 2008. Those were the inspiring events that this is anchored. But victory is at hand with it. And it is my hope that as you read the trilogy, but especially as you get this new one and read it, that you embrace the hope and the action that these heroes embrace in the face of everything. And this one's a rough one. This is a scary one for my heroes, and it's a scary one for us as people in the reality part of this. But they embrace the responsibility for their freedom, for their country, and they went at it and they find a solution. And the reason that I write to reach you and to reach your kids and your grandkids is that it is my hope and intention, it's my intention, that Generation Y will no longer be referred to as the trophy generation, which they're derogatorily referred to right now as a group, because they're given trophies for showing up and not necessarily for excellence. So they've acquired a term called the trophy generation. They themselves will sometimes say, yeah, when you tell us that we're kind of short-term goal-oriented, that's true of us, we're kind of all about me, and if the going gets rough, we tend to quit. That may or may not be true of the folks that are in your family. But that trophy thing, they know somehow demeans them. And I believe that this generation of young people, from the ones I've met, and I'm privileged to work with a lot of them in business, will be the hero generation. They have a unique set of characteristics, a unique willingness to face the story here unflinching. Because that comment that that young woman made that I put in my preface, that's not the only comment like that I get. When Generation Y comments, they bother to Facebook or they'll email me or whatever, they understand these stories. And so I said, this is very hopeful, because when that generation gets this point and they move forward with the tools they have, and they're operating outside the radar screen of this enemy at this time. And so I'm excited about that, and I hope you come to love these folks as well. I enjoyed writing these books, and as you read them, just remember that a crisis, and we got a bunch of them, is an opportunity right in a dangerous way. There's always the opportunity to come out of it greater. And something can always be done about it, but it truly is tough to explain to people they have been fooled. So I hope I've done it skillfully in my stories. Help you understand, okay? We've got time for questions. So.
Any questions?
I have to comment that you are extraordinarily eloquent.
Thank you.
Really eloquent.
Thank you.
You have a worldview that's enabled you to write this story, and actually you live this story through the characters and to your audience. Could you tell us what this current administration, where that fits into this scenario?
Well, in this third book, it is fiction. I had to, things were proving so true, to be honest with you. The third book, I had to fictionalize everything in it. So every name was changed, every institution. The institutions, the people are real, but they have different names. So the current administration is in this book because it picks up in 2011. And I think that they're in there, but almost, I'm not even going to get political in terms of partisan politics stuff. They're at the effect of an enemy whose understanding of the mind is far greater than they are. And so our own administration currently, I believe, if my story is real, is making moves that an enemy knew they would make in response, and they've been trapped in the moves that an enemy planned for them to make, which drives us closer to coming into the hands of this guy, my bad guy, who's Sir Harley Grantham Jones. He knew the moves that this administration would make, And he knew the moves that Americans would make, because we don't come out of this scot-free. We got Washington, we can yell at them as much as we want, but we put them there, and it doesn't matter which administration. The attack is on the American people. I don't want to give away the secret of the first book, but the attack is upon you. It's upon us. Because if we go, then we will break the resolve on our military anyway, and if we go and kind of wander in the wilderness or implode from within, because we're dumbed down and drugged up or whatever else is going on with us, we will not effectively be able to handle anything. The most dangerous thing on the planet is an American citizen who's awake, alert, and ready for a fight. We don't even have to be armed. We're just super bright. And we're committed and we're dedicated. And we also recognize, whether one agrees with it or not, that America's the 911 phone call. It is part of our responsibility to solve problems around the world. And when I had the opportunity to be with the military, and it was laid out, I saw so much of what we do is humanitarian. So much of what their budget goes to, so much of what is deployed around the planet is humanitarian. So our administration is in there, and they're saved in the very last second by my boys. They were about to make a mistake that would have enslaved us all and rendered our Constitution completely ineffective, destroyed our form of government, and it's actually founded on a document that exists and has been signed onto by the United States of America already. Just understand, when you read White King, the Battle of America, the story is real, the institutions are real, I just changed all the names. All right, it will scare you that way, and our administration in the story is moving right along that line, and we're about to end up in a slave state globally, and my boys save it right at the end. Yeah.
You talk about the most effective weapon against the enemy is hope and internal strength and confronting it. And I can't help but think that this is what organized religion, legitimate ones, also provide.
Yes.
A sense of hope and optimism, and compels us to feel this. And this is why totalitarian and communist regimes seek to undermine these religions. And I just wondered what your thoughts were in terms of what impact religion has on your story or has on your worldview.
Well, so religion is a very important part of my life, but it doesn't have an impact on my story. But it is one of the institutions that came under attack very soon. So it was one of the things I was looking at, of what do we anchor America on. And there's a religious foundation, and organized religion, as you talk about, is huge. It's absolutely vital to the morals, the ethics of a country, to the sustaining of a country through hard times. Religion is absolutely vital, in my opinion. Therefore, I knew an enemy would attack there, and they'll attack there first. They've got to bring down education. They've got to destroy the family unit, because America thrives on family units, and we thrive and were so bright and educated and so on for a long time, led the world in those areas. So I was looking at disintegrating institutions of education, because I come from a family of educators, watching attacks on religions and on people's faith, and trying to pit one religion against another, but more importantly, trying to criticize you for having one, or be participating in one. But I was watching very closely the disintegration of the family unit. It was part of my struggle in Hollywood. I retired from acting about 10 years ago. Because my resume, if you were to look at it, represents my worldview and represents my ethics, represents projects that I feel would enhance you. And as long as the project is something that if you put your time and your money into, you came out better for it, I was fine with it. Lots of different variety of things. I wanted you enhanced, not degraded. And as television began to proceed, in my opinion, it became more and more degraded. And unfortunately, those watching it become more and more degraded. Because remember the role of the artist. It is to plant a vision there, and it will take the culture to the vision. I didn't say it was always good. If bad guys are driving that vision and everybody's going into agreement with it, you're going to have a society change in the direction of the artist. And Hollywood, in my opinion, is at the core of that, and they refuse to acknowledge that they're having any impact upon you, your grandkids, or your kids. And I said, if we're not, how dare we call ourselves artists? The very nature of our communication is to produce an effect. Well, that didn't go over too well with a lot of people I was talking to out there. So I moved away from the acting because I was having to say for the first time, I won't do this, I won't do that. If you've read White King Rising, you can imagine I'm not doing too many pharmaceutical commercials and so on. But it's huge, the role of religion. And it's under attack, no question. The good news is that once you spot the Trojan horse and you recognize who the agents of that Trojan horse are, then you begin to realize the degree to which they have influenced your thought and kind of sedated you. Now, I don't mean to be in your face on it, but I do actually. I mean, I wrote these books in a story to bring you to awareness, and it's cool. Other question? Yeah.
I haven't read your books, but when you mentioned Trojan horse, my immediate thought was, well, that's Barack Obama. Now, is there any relationship in the book to Barack Obama?
No, I mean, you'll find as you look out, you're going to find what you want and need to see out there, and there might have been blind spots. I'll be pointing to a blind spot I'm pretty sure everybody in this room's got. So get ready. As I said, it's a wake-up call. But the more aware we are and the more we're able to face things, we see more things. I know I didn't write, these books have been bestsellers, the first two, and they also were the top-rated, #1 and #4, top customer-rated books in political fiction on Amazon Kindle for 8 months last year. But they're not partisan politics. They're really politics at the higher level of the governing affairs of men. I want the people of the United States to make it. I want the United States to make it. You too, I mean, that's obvious. But I want the people of the rest of the world to make it as well. And the United States does not have to be completely destroyed. It only has to be neutralized in order for somebody to take control of the rest of the world. And so anything that weakens us, and I know at my age I'm interested in those things, because I know there's a generation coming up behind us that if they don't get this and don't understand this, they won't be able to step up to the line. They might be willing to, but they wouldn't have the tools. The good news is that when information like this is brought to them, take it in, suck it right in. They want more. And they're willing to. You've observed that, Martha, haven't you? In the business and so on? Yeah. So, yes.
I have also not read your books, and I'm looking forward to that. You implied that you could start at the third book and still have an understanding?
Yes, you can, because I have to write that way so that a person's not completely lost when they start in the third book. Because it is, anytime you're writing sequential novels, whether it's a decalogy or a trilogy or whatever, but there's no question that what I described tonight, because I was covering for a lot of the folks who hadn't read the first two, there's no question that your understanding of what is going on out there and what's been happening to you and what you've been battling and not been able to maybe get all the way through on will be much better understood if you start with the first book.
But my question is also about the Hollywood culture. What are your impressions of this most recent mass murder in California and the young man who is very much a part of the Hollywood scene and his sort of total immersion and almost the killings were like a movie?
Yeah, the second book in its entirety is about what produces killers like that. And it's not that I'm dodging the question. This is the thing I address in public engagements, speaking engagements and so on. It is something I was prepared to bring up with the military, but these are suspense novels, and if I tell you what I actually know about that, it'll hit you in the face pretty hard, and I just need you to move yourself to it through the story, because this is the Trojan horse. There is something that causes these young men to turn into killers. The military knows it. Nobody's disagreeing with me on my stories and on the facts. They know it because it's a tool, and I call it by name as to what the tool is, but there is a particular group of people, it's only one group that can administer something that can turn someone like that into a killer. I can tell you it doesn't have to do with guns. Guns are just guns. But the propaganda is to get you to disarm yourself because of the killings. You understand, we're up against an extremely brilliant enemy. Rachel Ehrenfeld, who is not here tonight, and I had a conversation 2 nights ago, and because of what she writes about and the risk of her life, I mean, there are 3 assassination attempts on her so far, and I hope there's no more, because this woman really has put herself on the line to protect our freedom of speech, and she's an Israeli American who came here. And we were talking about that issue, and the issue being brainwashing and mind control. And that is, it's laid out in the first book how they're going to go at it and how they launch in public relations the strategies. And then the second book will reveal how a guy like that could happen. Do they dramatize stuff? Yes. But there's an earlier phenomenon in the mind going on. And then they'll pick some dramatization. So I didn't even know that guy was part of the Hollywood scene, but there's so many mass shootings. That should be alarming you. that it's happening before, it was bad enough when it happened at all, like once a year, but now they're happening about every 3 weeks, or 2 weeks, or every week now. I'm part of a human rights organization that's right on top of all this, right on top of all of this, with the factual data, presents the white papers, attempting to explain to the leaders in our government exactly where this is sourcing from. So that was the information that I knew and was part of my life before I started to tackle this whole scene. Yeah.
I just want to ask one more question since you brought up Rachel Ehrenfeld. My understanding is she got in trouble because she wrote a book exposing in England the Saudi terrorist funding. And I wondered if you had any comment on the threat of Islamic terrorism, or that's another topic.
The threat of Islamic terrorism, well, the stories are about that, that's for
Okay,
sure.
okay.
Certainly when you start that first book, it's going to be a little startling to you when you go in the first few pages, so get ready, because it is through the point of view of the actual mastermind, current head of Al-Qaeda. And that's the Egyptian doctor. So when you come into that first book, you're not coming through my point. You're not coming through your point of view or through the hero's point of view. You're coming through the enemy's point of view. See, that was all that I did that was different. I'm glad you brought that up, because Islamic terrorism, there's no question there's a threat. But we've fallen for the fact that it would only play out primarily militarily. I'm one of those thinkers that goes, if he's got a background in pharmacology and they're concerned that he's going to do a chemical weapons attack, yeah, he might do sarin gas, but he also has a background in pharmacology. Where else might he attack? So I will play games with myself like that, with that understanding of it. And it's in there. It is to be threatened, but we're looking at the military application of it. That's the least of the games. For those of you who have read the first book, remember? Second to the bottom was the military game. Religion is used to recruit and get those young men to kill themselves. Military is something that we're attracted to because it's noisy and there's bombs going off and stuff. The media loves that. But it's the higher level games. The enemy is not playing just one type of game. They have multiple strategies. And I just sat through a week at the highest strategic level in the Air War College down there, where our own guys are looking at what would the various strategies be that they could deploy in the event of, they're playing their own what-if games in there. But I can tell you the subject matter of my books did not even come up. And it should. So I'm bringing it up to them. I don't mean the books. I mean, they're missing something. I think very asymmetrically. Yeah.
I feel that the enemy is, as you said, it's much more dangerous when they infiltrate our society, education, laws, all of that. I see that every day happening before my eyes. It gets me more and more upset every day because I have children and grandchildren, and I see in the future this is not going to be a good thing for them. It's just going to be worse and worse. Have you had any pushback? Because now, as far as identifying an enemy, it's as if now everything is politically correct. So you're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to say that, you might offend this one, and we might offend the enemy. God forbid we might offend the enemy. So that's the feeling I get is happening in the country, and that's a very good ploy for the enemy to use.
Oh yeah, it's the exact result that my character Samir, who's the propaganda chief for the bad guys, and who is their public relations officer, it's exactly the effect he wanted to produce. The answer to me on my question is no, and you know why? Because I write fiction.
Okay, so you don't have people commenting, anyone commenting, oh, she's, she has an agenda behind this.
Well, I would hope I do. I mean,
I'm glad you do, because
Yeah.
you're fighting for the good guys.
Yeah, I
But
don't,
I'm
these are
wondering
not fluff,
with the bad
these are
guys.
not thrillers that you're gonna read and put down and never think of again. You will remember these stories. So I do have an agenda. My agenda is wake everybody up, present some solutions, or challenge you to create solutions and so on. But it doesn't really matter to me whether they think my own personal political views are incorrect or correct. They would be grossly politically incorrect. But coming at the reader, because these books play very well with a liberal mindset as well. They play very well with them, because when one goes into the story and lives with the characters, through the story and the characters, they're coming to the same realizations about this. Because I'm not trying to do what the enemy is doing. I'm not trying to get a knee-jerk stimulus response. And that's why I don't often engage one administration against another, because I just know I'm playing in the hands of my own characters that I wrote there. So I went to a higher level, if you will. and to try to bring about an understanding. But being a fiction writer, people will put up with stuff in drama, whether it's a film or a book, in fiction, because they are going along with the story. And that's why I brought up those other authors. Some of them also did nonfiction stuff, probably, or did essays. You know, we have blogs now, but back then they probably did newspaper essays and so on. But it was their fiction works that carried the truth. Remember, I wasn't trying to do true stories. There I could be attacked. If I were presenting this as true stories, I didn't.
What about Ayn Rand? They've absolutely discredited her and made her into a monster.
Yeah.
In, you know, as far as social, how she's accepted as an author.
I'm compared to her at times, and to be honest with you, if we do what I hope to do with these books and a television series or film, and those books are carried out there, mass market, I know the books will deliver the result because I already know the reader's response. It's 100%, oh my God, I think this is true. If that happens, and even if later somebody discredited me, I don't care. I don't really care, because I would have already accomplished my purpose of affecting a change in the society and getting people thinking and talking. We won't always agree on everything, that's not the point, but the discussion and debate needs to be rational. It can't be stimulus response. The minute it's stimulus response, meaning if somebody says black, the other one says white. If somebody says yes, the other one says no, you know there's a mind guy. Remember this when you leave here. There's a mind guy working on you. They want you in a stimulus response because no reasonable debate can happen with it. The good news for me when I was with these military guys was that I saw how diligent they are to establish good and reasoning and reasonable discussion with opposing military. I saw it up close and personal as they went through real life scenarios, but also the what if games that we were doing, and I said, okay, these guys are pretty sane. Because insanity is the stimulus response. This is coming factually from so remember that first question, those questions, I said, what if it came from an old Soviet plan? Out of the Soviet military encyclopedia was their plan on how to bring down the United States of America, because nobody will ever bring us down militarily. It was their plan on how to neutralize us. So my stories do involve that. Rachel Ehrenfeld discusses that a bit as well in there. But these guys, you just have to remember who these guys, their research is Pavlov's research. Stalin, Pavlov, Hitler, and his guys. Anyone who, there's always been people who thought they should rule the world. And I think we would be hopelessly naive if we think that the last one died in 1950. You know what I'm saying? Or whenever that guy died, or that he died in the bunker with Hitler. I think we would be ridiculously naive to assume that after all of man's history, there's not one or more guys who absolutely believe that none of us is capable of taking care of ourselves and that they need to control the whole thing, and they're working in ways to do it. That is the level that this book is at. It went from the level of Al-Qaeda all the way through the journey I made in my own research that led to this book. And but they follow the actions of people who were subjugating people. Hitler knew that suppose he won and he was controlling the world, he didn't have the manpower to keep all of us under control. How would he do it? See, when you ask that question, how would he do it, that leads you straight into the book White King Rising. How would Stalin, had they prevailed, how do you control 7 billion people? That's a question the bad guys, you've got to be sure, are asking themselves now, because they don't plan on losing. When we win, how are we going to control 7 billion people? And that is the story of the White King. How to defeat them, they never get a chance. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I'm very optimistic about the next generation as well, from the millennials all the way through. My concern is, are they reading? You go around and talk to young people, obviously. Are they still reading fiction?
Well, they're allowed to read fiction, and they're only reading some of the stuff that feels like a textbook to them.
Yeah.
They watch, I think, at least 9 movies or stuff in film to every book. But that's not a problem either, because this material, any material, not just my material, but material can be translated into documentaries, can be translated into dramas on film. So reaching them through another media is not a problem for me. I don't consider it. Now, we hold thoughts about reading, and yes, I would prefer somebody read the book rather than just watch the movie, because you gain more by reading. They will read especially if their interest is grabbed. See, a lot of it, they've just never been engaged. Nobody's ever talked to them as if they were worth engaging. But trust me, if you actually ask them a question and you want their opinion about something, their evaluation, it will come back at you. It may surprise you, but it will come back at you. They are thinking, but in college, they're beginning to realize that the college textbooks have been changed and that they've missed American history. This is the year I work a lot, and they're beginning, and I'm not trying to categorize a whole 70 million of them, but the more able ones, the cream of the crop and so on, they're beginning to realize that they got gaps in their education. And they're beginning to realize, they clearly realize they're going to be taking care of their parents. They clearly realize the economic game has changed. They are looking for what went wrong and how do we win. Because like we were at that age, everybody starts out in their life. We're ambitious. We want to succeed in life. We want to have family. They're very family oriented. That's very good news. Because especially if you read my stories, or if you talk to them about religion, you talk to them about the value of the family and so on, they'll respond on that. They'll swing around and listen. Just don't ever try to con them. They're very savvy on the con, meaning you come at them with cliches, you come at them with something that maybe you haven't thought about in 20 years, but it came out of your mouth 20 years ago, so you're just repeating it. They don't like that. They want to be right in the present moment, and they'll shift on a dime. But when they hear somebody talking about something like religion, because they have a spiritual sense like we all do. They're no different. They're a human being walking around, they're a young one, and they're smart. And it's a big generation, bigger than the baby boom generation, and they're smart. So when you find the opinion, that's what I go for. I try to find the opinion leaders and help them. Then they in turn will help one another. There's no way that we would do that ourselves. The blessing of this, and this is going to be to the detriment of the enemy will fall on this issue. They listen to one another. So as we bring up any in that generation and they become opinion leaders, they share with one another and they trust one another. They don't trust the ads, which is the attack line that in my first book the guy used. They don't trust television ads. They don't trust TV. They don't trust a lot of the stuff that comes out of people's mouths. They do trust one another, and that's good news if you find the best of the best and give them tools and let them go solve stuff. I'm very optimistic as well. In fact, I would have had less hope even myself writing what I just wrote in these 3 books had I not at the same time on another line encountered Generation Y, because I'm loving them, and I'm going, we're going to win this thing. We're going to win this thing, but we got to think fresh. We can't be thinking in cliches, and we've got to be looking really, what is the enemy doing? And then just don't do what the enemy expects you to do. Because he's figured this out. Americans are easy to figure out, I think. Okay?
Wow.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Lee will be signing books where Carol is selling the books. Actually, you can buy the 3 books if you're missing some, or 2, depending on if you've been here before and you bought 1. So we have all 3. We have the trilogy. So it's up to you. And she'll sign the books right now at Carol's desk. And I'm very happy that all of you are here. And on August 6th, between 5 and 7:30, we have Dr. Ben Carson. So I hope you put that in your calendars and come back from your holiday vacations for him, because he's a really special gentleman. Thanks again.